because it's badass and makes heterosexual men like me gay for guts. But being serious, I never really seen anyone talk about why does Guts have a big sword and they keep getting bigger. This aspect of Guts' character doesn't get talked enough, despite it being something that's right in front of our faces pretty much 24/7. And I'm pretty sure the reason as to why I never really seen people talk about this is because it's normal for us already and we just move on. So I figured I share my take on this. So welcome to my Berserk Deep Dive Part 5, where I analyze every Berserk moment in the entire series because I'm crazy. And this time I really want to look deeply into this, as Guts throughout his entire life has had different swords and each depicts something new about Guts. As a small kid he had a regular sword which was bigger than his kid self. Teenage Guts had a custom sword that is larger than the regular swords, as even strangers upon seeing it were shocked at the size. As for adult Guts, he then had an even bigger sword than his teenage self, and post Golden Age arc Guts is of course the even bigger and iconic sword, the Dragon Slayer. Now sure, Guts using big swords is badass as hell, and without those big swords we would never have gotten the iconic quote, "It was too big to be called a sword, massive dick." But besides that, my take on why Guts uses a bigger sword as he grows up actually has a different reason for each period of his life. Starting with Kid Guts, the moment he first wields a sword. When Gambino was training Guts and we see Guts using a sword bigger than him, and a mercenary tells Guts, "Why don't you use a sword that's more your size?" And Guts stubbornly refuses, and the reason why is because of Gambino. As sad as it is, many of Guts' issues and aspects of his character, it can all be traced back to Gambino. And it's amazing writing from Miura, but my god is it sad and painful. Guts wants to make Gambino proud. Despite his constant abuse, Guts still sees him as his dad, and it's that abuse and lack of attention from Gambino that makes Guts want his love and approval more. And Gambino training Guts is clearly the only time Guts has spent time with his father, with Gambino. From Guts' perspective, this is the only way Gambino will be proud of him. If he were able to use a sword like the others and not a kiddie sword, as Gambino in this chapter treats Guts as any other mercenary, and this is how Guts excuses the abuse Gambino puts him through, as Gambino is treating him like he would the rest, and that's why he is stubbornly using a sword bigger than him, as Gambino treats him like any other mercenary. Thus, Guts wants to show his dad that he could live to those expectations of his. Guts doesn't question the wrong, as it's not wrong from his perspective, as this is how he grew up. Now let's move towards the future with teenager Guts. He went out of his way to get a sword bigger than regular swords. I believe this is where there's a shift towards Guts' mindset as to why he uses bigger swords. At first, as a kid, it was him seeking approval for Gambino, but teenager Guts uses it as a safety blanket. Now sure, some are gonna say, but Kid Guts also used it as a safety blanket as he sleeps with his sword whenever he feels scared, but that's a different thing. That's not related to the size of his sword, but more his relationship with swords in general, as Guts saw his sword as the only thing he can trust, which is why he always sleeps with it. But now with teenager Guts, it's different. He lost his father, the one who taught him everything, the one who painted the world for him by giving him toxic advice as shown in a future flashback. And well, after losing that figure, I believe Guts sought an even bigger sword as a safety blanket to feel safe from this world that Gambino painted, and in a way for Guts to tell himself everything's going to be alright if he's able to use a sword bigger than the one he trained with as a kid, one Gambino deemed as normal. So if he uses an even bigger sword than the one he used with Gambino, then that will make his world safer. Things will be alright. Next is adult Guts, who's now part of the Band of the Hawk and once again has an even bigger sword, but no longer does he subconsciously use the big sword as a safety blanket, as his mindset has changed once again after finally experiencing warmth he never had as a child. And it's shown time and time again that this Guts fights with a different mindset, not just for himself anymore, but rather for others as well, as shown when he had this fight with Casca. Thus his mindset on using a bigger sword subconsciously has changed as well, and it's changed from a safety blanket to a blade that longs for connection, to connect with others, as Guts himself knows of no other way to connect with others without using his sword, and it's explicitly told to us in chapter 48. And then there's this moment moment in chapter 7, where Guts literally holds his sword towards the moon, which Guts views as Griffith, showing how this time the link of his sword reflects that longing of connection, and the only way he knows to connect is through his sword. Which then brings us to post Golden Age Guts and his final and most iconic sword, the Dragon Slayer. And my god, is it the most badass sword. And sure, Miura, when he created Berserk and we got the Black Swordsman arc, he didn't think far ahead. But Miura is an amazing writer and capitalizes on stuff he wrote in the past and uses it in the future to enhance the story. As it's shown during the first arc, in an interview, Miura said he didn't plan many things like Casca, Griffith, and even this being Casca's son. So Miura did the same with the Dragon Slayer. All Guts' previous swords represented his desire to connect with others, or to seek approval with Gambino, or used as a safety blanket. But with the Dragon Slayer represents Guts' hatred, his rage, and it's done perfectly with the Dragon Slayer. Something that can slay and destroy pretty much anything. Something that can match his hatred and convey it to the world, which is why he gets this Dragon Slayer after his traumatic experience. In the Eclipse, despite how badass this sword is, Miura clearly is not only trying to convey it as something badass, as shown with Erika's reaction to Guts using the Dragon Slayer for the first time. She was scared, and so was Rickard, and you would think it will remain that way, but Miura then did something amazing and flipped it over. In chapter 131, and Goro says, and I quote, "A good sword, even if it rusts and dulls, has good steel that never rusts. Left over in the wick, that steel's the ultimate steel. Even if it cracks, if you return it to the fire, it's sure to be reborn." Showing that yes, Guts' sword right now is filled with hatred and rage, but it can always be reborn, and it has. Guts' sword went from one that purely went after apostles to soothe his own hatred and rage, to one that protects his own bonds from the apostles or any other dangers. And my god, do I love Berserk. Well, this ends part 5 of my Berserk deep dive series. I hope you enjoyed and liked the video, and look forward to part 6 soon.